Welcome to another episode of Muslims and Mental Health. Today we'll be discussing positive parenting in the Muslim home with Munira, Ezzeldine, and Noha Alshugairi. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And I would like to give you just a moment to introduce yourselves and let the audience know what it is you do so that they can themselves avail themselves of your services if possible.
Okay.
So Munira, why don't we start with you?
So I am a professional counselor, was specializing in college and career counseling. So I have my own private practice as a private college counselor, and I am also an author of the book.
You do premarital.
I also do premarital
Yes,
counseling.
it's important you say that.
Yes, premarital counseling, college and career counseling. I work with young adults and adolescents.
And I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I have a private practice in Newport Beach, California. And alhamdulillah, worked on this book with Munira. It was a beautiful journey, 3 years in the making, alhamdulillah. Excited to be here, thank you. I've been married 34 years. Alhamdulillah, has been blessed with 4 children, 4 adult children. And alhamdulillah, in 2016, we've been blessed with 3 grandchildren.
Well, welcome. We're certainly happy to have you both here. And for our viewers, we will have their information at the end if you would like to contact them yourself, along with some other information about them. So let's get started into the book. Here's the book, right? Positive Parenting in the Muslim Home. I want to ask you, what is positive parenting?
There are so many things that go under positive parenting. I think maybe what I would like to highlight is people understand immediately from the word positive that it is definitely encouraging, and it is definitely empowering, and it is definitely supportive. I think immediately that's there. What maybe people miss from the name is that they don't understand that there isn't a lot of rewards, if you will, in positive parenting, and there aren't a lot of empty praise too. So the idea I get from people sometimes when I mention the name, they go, "Oh, okay, so you do positive reinforcement." And I'm like, if we are talking positive reinforcement as in Pavlov's experiment with the dog, and then no, that's not what we do here. It's more about discovering, uncovering the potential in children, and the parents or teachers being the
Mentors,
guides. The guides, supporters, the cheerleaders along the way. So positive parenting is not about having a specific agenda for what kind of children you need to have at the end. No, it's about you being from a place of discovery and humility, and really appreciating what Allah has granted you in your life and working with that.
So it's really connected to relationship. It's a relationship-focused approach to parenting, and it's based on connection, that if we're going to have influence on our children, it's going to have to be through that relationship, through that connection that's built between parent and child.
And so just circling back for our viewers, because they may not all be aware of Pavlov's experiment.
That's true, that's so true, right?
So if you could expand a little bit on that, what was that experiment?
So this was in the early 20th century, and basically he did experiments with dogs, looking at how is the dog responding to stimulus in the environment. So I don't remember the details exactly of the experiment, but basically he came up with the idea that if you give the dog some kind of reward, which is basically food in that particular situation, then you get the dog to habitually perform certain tasks because he's anticipating the reward. So positive parenting is definitely not on board with the idea of rewards, because rewards have a ceiling, if you will. Like yes, with young children they work like magic, even with young children, but even with some children, like my second son, failed miserably. Anyway, so, but as the kids grow older, rewards lose the potency because of the ceiling issue, and because children recognize their own agency, they also start deciding whether they like the reward or they don't like the reward. So from the beginning in positive parenting, we say, okay, so let's not get used to, as parents or teachers, to the idea of I'm going to use rewards to modulate behavior, and rather focus on what Munira was saying. What kind of relationship do we have? What kind of connection do we have? And then work with the challenges that come up.
So I'm thinking how some parents might relate to this in outside of Pavlov's experiment is through behavioral charts, or sometimes we see and hear of parents saying, well, if you get an A on your report card, we'll give you $10 or something, right? And that's what you're referring to, 100%. Is the reward aspect. What I would like to just take it a little bit further than, as Munira was talking about the relational aspect, for a parent who's used to that behavioral chart or that, rewarding for the A, how does it switch then with the relational view as opposed to that reward stimulus that Noha was explaining?
Right, because the reward stimulus is extrinsically motivated, right? The child becomes extrinsically motivated. What happens outside of their control is what's going to impact their behavior. So the shift is that we're looking at what's intrinsically motivating for the child and how the child can within themselves understand, I'm capable, I can be responsible. All these qualities that we say we want our children to have, how that can come from within when we give them, feedback, and when we build a relationship with them and highlight for them their strengths and show them that, we see that they are capable. It builds this self-awareness, right? It builds this intrinsic motivation about, their agency and their ability to, impact the world and not just the world impacting them.
So based on that, what I hear you saying is that it's going to be unique for every child. And Noha kind of explained this earlier with the idea that it worked for some children and not for other children. The rewards, mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. But is that accurate? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think every child has a different temperament, right? Just like every parent has a different temperament. So when we mix those two together, it's going to look different. And what I say to many parents is parenting really is this like creative endeavor. It's not just a cookbook kind of recipe. We have to, bend and move and be creative and be experimental in how we're kind of approaching what this child's temperament is and how we can interact to support them, not of who we want them to be, but who they are intrinsically. Mm-hmm. So that's why what tools, what positive parenting tools a parent will use may look different, right? But they're still the same tools. Some tools are, going to be really, clicking with a certain child versus others are going to click with another child. But all of them at some point are going to be effective.
So why do you think this is important now?
I think because life has changed mainly. Okay, so we live right now in the 21st century. The lifestyle that was maybe revolving around the family is no longer there. Mm-hmm. In order for families to preserve the connection and the relationship, they need to be more intentional. So like very simply, I heard from my supervisor that in the US a long time ago, like stores used to close at 5 or 6 p.m. Mm-hmm. and people would be home after that. I'm like, nowadays in the US, stores close at 10 p.m. You have 24/7 shopping, right? So you need to be the person who's like intentional in terms of saying, you know what, family time is happening at this time. I'm not gonna allow any distractions mm-hmm. to interfere with that family time. So there is more work on the parents' plate right now in order to ensure that connection and relationship is happening. It used to be easier before. Right. I'm not saying there were no challenges before. There are always challenges. But because the lifestyle right now is so varied and so many distractions and so many things that people can do, I think we really are trying in this book to invite parents to become intentional mm-hmm. and to become more conscious about their parenting practices. And ultimately, it's for because Munira and I really truly believe that within the family cradle, you have the foundation for really good mental health for adults later on. Mm-hmm. That's the foundational piece. And I truly believe as a therapist, really some of these problems I see in my office could have been prevented with a better parenting practice mm-hmm. earlier on.
So I want to add that I think why it's important now is that we want to see more peace and love in the world. And I really believe if we start in our homes, it is going to be this ripple effect, and that, you know, the most impact we can have is within our homes. And imagine if we all made those small changes and impacted these children's lives and impacted our family homes, and even as a community and as an ummah and as a world, we can kind of see that peace and love that we want to see in the world, but it has to start in our homes.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think part of that also includes our community valuing being in the home. And, you know, somebody has to be at home. Somebody has to be, you know, however we negotiate that. And I'm all for whatever is halal and negotiating, you know, whether it's the man or the woman, but someone has to be anchoring the home front, right? And that's very valuable. You know, along those lines, and thinking back to what you were talking about, Sister Noha, the LA County did a study that absolutely illustrates what you were saying, right? Because oftentimes in urban areas, the downtown areas, there's an assumption. The study was about sexuality, right, in teenagers, and they found that there was an assumption usually made that in downtown areas you have more sexual activity, there's less focus on children and so forth, right? Because everybody's working and so forth. But as you say, precisely, downtown areas still close around 5 or 6. Well, most urban areas, right? Because of many different factors, right? But some of it is food deserts. Some of it has to do with violence. Some, you know, there's many different factors influencing that. But what we see coming out of the sexuality study is that they compared LA County and Orange County, where you have suburban life, right? And the LA County kids are less sexually active than the Orange County kids.
That's fascinating. Honestly, I love the study.
And why? Because there's more people with eyes on them. And that one, because of crowding is part of the, but also because things are closing. There's an emphasis on being at home, right? And people watching each other's kids. Whereas in the Orange County, where you have larger spaces where people can have privacy and go into private spaces, they get away with, and parents working all of the time to afford the lovely homes in Orange County, they don't have as many eyes on them, and there's not an emphasis so much as people being home and watching that. Minds is pleased to sponsor Muslims and Mental Health by Sister Heather. Minds is a family-centered development organization based in the Inland Empire in North Orange County in Southern California. With a wide charitable network of specialty healthcare providers, community development, and economic empowerment programs, Minds empowers families through community development, providing specialty health care, and raising mental health awareness. Mind's core values include dignity, responsibility, compassion, comfort, impact, and excellence, with service to patients. Some of the benefits to participating providers include information and education regarding changes in healthcare management and policy, annual network meetings, and access to a network of providers in multiple specialties. A Provider of the Month profile featured in Minds newsletter. The great team that is behind Minds includes Dr. Faisal Qazi, Dr. Tayyef Kaisi, Iram Chowski, and Yasmin Ibrahim. Please join Minds at www.mindsnetwork.org. So on to the tools that you mentioned before, Munira. How does this work? How does positive parenting work? What are some of the tools that you can share with us that parents can avail themselves of?
Maybe we begin by also establishing that positive parenting is about two main things. One is the framework, okay, which is basically the attitude or the view towards parenting, which needs to shift, okay? And then there are the tools. Right. So the tools are very concrete, okay, very specific, do this, do that. However, Munira and I have discovered that there are many parents who do the tools, but they haven't shifted in the framework. And that's why they come back and say, oh, it's not working. Oh, this is,
Right. Or if you're using the tools as still a manipulating force, then it's not with the spirit of positive, parenting. And so the tools, many of them are common sense, right? Many of them are things that we say, oh, yeah, that makes sense. There's some tools that are reframing things that maybe we thought were good parenting practices or, good tools. For example, the one that I know comes up often is a positive timeout. So the term timeout, people love to throw this term around and use it because it's a very punitive thing, and a parent or a teacher feels in control, right? You feel like you're in control. You can teach the child a lesson by putting them in the corner, right? And they're going to learn something from that. So positive discipline reframes that whole notion that when we need a timeout, when we need to cool down, the last thing we need is to be, shunned and left to be separated from the group, right? We need actually more connection and more compassion when, we've done something wrong, or we've need to think about something. So the way it's reframed within positive parenting is that is a way to gather yourself, to take a positive time out, is to find a space within the home or within the classroom that has been mutually determined, right, with the child and the parent or teacher as a space that we're going to regather ourselves and we're going to feel better, right? And again, it's intrinsic, right? I'm going to do what I need to gather myself to feel better so that I can, calm down and come back and be able to, solve the problem that, happened, or, fix whatever needs to be fixed, or, reflect on whatever needs to reflect, but it needs to come from this place of having a safe place, a safe space to, like I said, gather yourself. So that's, a tool, but that's also a mindset, right, of how we approach our children and what is really best for them to be able to grow and develop, Yeah,
I can totally relate to this because when my stepson was young, it was such the fashion to do the timeout in the corner, that whole thing, right? And this was before I was a therapist myself and didn't fully understand the mechanics that you're talking about, the framework that you're talking about. And even for the parent, there was this sense of a lack of connection, a connectivity, because I was just as tortured as he was being when he was in the corner, because he was a more creative child, a more active child. So being in the corner without any understanding it didn't work. And he resented it, and I too felt pain because I didn't like him just standing in the corner. You know what I mean? There was that lack of understanding and relational quality that you're describing that was missing from it. Had we, like you said, agreed together, maybe it would have. And it also feels like there's a quality of shaming in that when you don't have that relational quality to it, right?
And that's very important, because that's exactly what Munira was alluding to earlier, in terms of yes, you could be using positive parenting tools, but if the tone, if the way it's being done to shame and to denigrate, then yes, definitely you're not doing positive parenting then.
Right.
Yeah.
And most parents, unless they have some, kind of trauma of their own that they haven't worked through, right? I doubt that they would ever want to shame their children.
It's not intentional.
Yeah,
and
it's not intentional.
No. And I think that's part of why also Munira and I were very keen on writing the book, because there are so many practices that are definitely not intentional. And our parents, especially in our community, because there's no doubt in our community how much our children are being loved, right? I mean, parents hold this responsibility very, seriously. However, they do all these interesting practices in the name of love. In the name of, I want the best for my child. I want my child to be the perfect Muslim. So I'm going to do tough love with them so that they will become good adults. And so it's all done in the name of love. But because they're focused on the short term, they miss all the consequences or ramifications of what is this doing long term.
And I hate to go back to this because I know that's not part of positive parenting, but just to contrast the reward idea again, right? Because in my experience, it has been that working with resiliency, that kids don't bounce back when you have that rewards. If all it is about is the reward system, they are never allowed to fail, they're never allowed to fall, and they don't know what it means to bounce back,
Well
right?
done. Absolutely.
And so, and I hear you both saying you're proposing a different, as you said, mindset of how to view the children in this way, because, and I think that often this comes from many of our parents are in a survival mode, especially the ones who come who are immigrants. Their first years here are about survival, and so it's hard for them to get beyond the mindset of I can only do with my children what I know to do, because they don't have the space for this creativity of the relationship building, right? So in looking at the diversity in our community, would you have any advice or nasiha for those parents who are suffering, not suffering, but are in that position, they're in that place where it's hard to make space for to open up to this idea?
Can I share? I'm going to share a story. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this because this story struck me. It was a part of the series that NPR did. It was entitled "This I Believe." So it's an amazing series. I invite anyone who's watching to read the book or hear it, because it's podcast as well. Anyway, one of the stories that really impacted me was the story of this very famous, well-known physician from can't remember now the name of a very distinguished institution. So his I believe is he believes in his mother. And he talked about his mother, who I don't know exactly if she was immigrant or what exactly, but they were basically poor. She had to work several jobs in order to provide. She was a single mother. And he said that my mom insisted on taking us to the library and insisted that we will write reports about the books we are reading, okay? He didn't discover until he was in 4th grade that his mom did not read or write.
Oh, wow.
She hid that from them. She would take, she basically... Yeah, exactly, yeah. So mashallah, later on she goes back and she actually finishes college later on. But the point is here, I understand that people are struggling. I understand that there are so many challenges, and I understand for the immigrant population specifically, there are so many layers of, trials, and they're just, dealing with a lot. However, I think it's extremely important for anyone, whether immigrant, non-immigrant, even rich people, because rich people have their own dilemma of, being distracted by consumerism, right? So that's a distraction, right? My invitation to anyone is to pause. Really pause in your life right now and really think about what's really important to you. 20 years from now, what do you want to see? Because I think the issue here is people are just sucked in the daily grind of everything, the daily grind, and they're not thinking. They're not saying, oh, okay, no, this is what's really, truly important, and thus, this is what I need to do. So my invitation is pause, reflect, figure out what are your priorities, and then act accordingly. And take it small steps. Like, I mean, I had a client yesterday as she's leaving, and I'm telling her as she's leaving, okay, small steps. And she's like, no, I can't. I said, Habibti, nothing happens without small steps. And she looks at me like, yeah, did Bill Gates build his empire with like one big, thing? And she's, no. I said, okay.
Small steps.
Yeah.
Well, and this is why I love, positive parenting, is because it is a long-term view of parenting. It's not about just the right now, putting out fires. It's about, like Noha said, it's about seeing the big picture of what is your goal in raising your kids? Like, what do you hope to see at the end of it? And if we really can focus in that way, then we're going to be more intentional about what we're doing. And we're going to pause, hopefully, and really say, is this what I'm doing right now really going to lead me to what I hope to, to accomplish in the future, or what I hope to.
I really like that, because we see so many children when they get to that 18 to 20 mark, or where they're leaving their families and they don't look back.
Exactly. Because of the lack of connection. Exactly.
I could always tell in my first experience as a therapist, my population were adolescents in the school system. And I could always tell what kids were going to have that experience, because they would apply to colleges far away from their families. They wanted to get away. And unfortunately, by that point, I mean, you can still work on the family.
You can. Yes.
But it's a lot of things are set, and it's more of undoing, right?
It is, unfortunately.
But this approach, inshallah, hopefully avoids that by putting the seeds in earlier, so that you don't have that experience.
Yeah, that's our invitation. No matter where anyone is on their parenting journey, that there is always something to do. There will be more to do if the children are younger. And as they grow older, the limits or the circle of influence that you have becomes smaller on them. But still, there are stuff that you can do. Like even if your child is like an adult and you've been disconnected from them, why don't you pick up the phone and say, "Hey, son, I love you. Hey, son, let's agree to disagree. Hey, son, or daughter, it doesn't have to be son. I just love you. I don't like some of the stuff you're doing, but let's stay connected." I mean, we can do that.
Yes. So now I'd like to shift. We like to ask fun questions at the end of our episodes, and we're going to start with you, Sister Munira, and ask you, who is your favorite Muslim hero and why?
It's a hard question. So when I think of this question, I want to say like Muslim women in general are just my heroes. I have been influenced and inspired, and the energy of women, I find, they're my heroes. Specifically, I go back to my mom. I just think her resilience in life, I think, has brought me to where I am. So I feel like, that we may take for granted those, the women that are closest to us, and my mom isn't the loudest, and my mom isn't the fiercest, but her level of resilience in life is something that now, as I've gotten older, I can really appreciate.
MashaAllah. And what is your favorite Islamic concept and why?
So my favorite Islamic concept is this concept that our relationship with Allah is a personal relationship. That, I find it profound that most of the things in our faith are communal, right? It's, our communal practices related to our communities, related to our families, and yet our direct relationship with Allah it's personal. It's between you and God. How you interact, how much value you put on that relationship, how the dua that you make, it's just between you and Him. And I find that just so beautiful and so powerful, and how it just recenters me and refocuses me.
MashaAllah. Now, what is your favorite word and why?
So my favorite word, which I feel like I use probably all the time, is context. I think context for me gives me kind of that compass about understanding people's stories, and understanding that if we see people outside of context, we really don't understand the full story. I've been blessed to travel the world, to see different experiences, live in different parts of the world, and context always gives you more empathy and more understanding of people's experiences, and that we cannot be separated from our context, even in our understanding of our faith.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate both of you, coming and spending this time with us. At this time, we need to conclude the second episode. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Muslims and Mental Health. Please join us again for part 2 of Positive Parenting in the Muslim Home, where Sister Munira and Sister Noha will be rejoining us for a further discussion on their book. Thank you, and please join us with any questions, comments, or concerns at nafshealertherapy@gmail.com, which you'll see below. And also join us on our adjunctive website at www.nafshealertherapywordpress.com for additional tools and resources. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.